Alaska, the land of mystery and vanishing. The vast, untamed wilderness of Alaska is as enigmatic as it is beautiful. The story of Alaska's inclusion into the United States begins in the late 19th century, a time when the young nation was still expanding its frontiers. In the year 1868, the United States finalized the acquisition of Alaska from the Russian Empire in a monumental land deal. The transaction, which cost the U.S. government $7.2 million, was orchestrated by Secretary of State Franklin Pierce. Initially, many Americans scoffed at what they saw as a foolish endeavor, mocking the acquisition by dubbing it Pierce's Icebox or Pierce's Folly. Detractors argued that the purchase had no apparent benefit, given that the land appeared to be nothing more than a frozen wasteland of ice and snow. However, history would soon prove these critics wrong. Just a few short decades later, the discovery of rich gold deposits in the Yukon in the 1890s sparked a massive influx of fortune seekers and settlers, igniting the Klondike Gold Rush and forever changing the region's fate. Alaska's strategic geographical position, coupled with its untapped reserves of natural resources, cemented its place as an invaluable asset to the United States. On January 3, 1960, Alaska was officially admitted to the Union as the 49th state, marking a new chapter in its long and storied history. But the tale of Alaska doesn't begin with the Americans or even the Russians. Long before foreign flags were planted in its soil, Alaska was home to a variety of indigenous cultures whose ancestry traces back tens of thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that human habitation in the region dates as far back as 13,500 BC to 9,500 BC. During that ancient time, a land bridge known as Beringia connected what is now eastern Russia with western Alaska. This prehistoric corridor allowed for the migration of early humans, animals, and even entire ecosystems between the continents of Asia and North America. Today, the descendants of those early settlers, such as the Athabaskan, Aleut, Inupiat, Yupik, Tlingit, Haida, and Chugach peoples, continue to preserve their traditional ways of life. They also continue to pass down their rich oral histories, many of which are steeped in folklore, mysterious creatures, and cautionary tales that echo through the remote valleys and frozen coastlines. One such legend tells of the Kalyapalik, a sinister entity from Inuit folklore. The Kalyapalik is often described as a green-skinned humanoid female with long, stringy black hair and elongated, claw-like fingernails. According to ancient tales, the Kalyapalik lurks just beneath the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, waiting patiently for its unsuspecting prey. It is said to emit a humming sound to lure children, or even unwary adults, toward the shoreline. Once close enough, the Kalyapalik snatches its victim, dragging them to a watery grave beneath the frigid waves. But the Kalyapalik is not the only creature said to haunt the Alaskan wilds. Among the Nunamiut people and other native groups, there are stories of the Tornit, sometimes referred to as the Alaskan Bushmen. These beings are said to be an ancient, reclusive race of large, hairy humanoids who once lived alongside the Inuit. According to legend, the Tornit were unable to craft the sophisticated kayaks that the Inuit used for travel and hunting. Instead, they resorted to stealing these valuable watercrafts, igniting a long-standing conflict between the two peoples. Eventually, the Inuit are said to have driven the Tornit deep into the remote and desolate wilderness. Some native Alaskans believe that these Bushmen still roam the forests and mountains, silently watching those who venture too far from the beaten path. Another chilling legend concerns the Sisserak, an enormous serpent-like creature said to inhabit the depths of Alaska's lakes and coastal waters. Described as being up to 20 feet long, the Sisserak is believed to attack kayaks and canoes, dragging the unfortunate souls aboard into the freezing depths. Natives have told tales of fishermen vanishing without a trace, their empty boats found adrift or capsized, with deep gouges marking their hulls. Whether these stories are rooted in truth or simply serve as cautionary tales designed to keep children close to home, they contribute to Alaska's reputation as a land shrouded in mystery. Some dismiss the legends as folklore. Others believe they hint at an ancient, hidden truth buried deep within Alaska's uncharted wilderness. What cannot be dismissed, however, are the alarming statistics surrounding disappearances in Alaska. Since 1990, when formal records began being maintained, more than 58,000 individuals have been reported missing within the state. On average, 5 people per 1,000 residents disappear every year, double the national average. Some are found alive, many are discovered deceased, and others are never seen again. Despite the high rate of disappearances, there remains surprisingly little documentation or analysis dedicated to these cases. In the coming months, I intend to delve deeper into these mysteries, focusing on the infamous Alaska Triangle and certain national parks where many of these vanishings occur. The disappearance of Kenneth O'Donnell, 1987, Wolf Cove, Glacier Sound National Park. Nestled to the west of Juneau, Glacier Sound National Park is a remote and pristine wilderness accessible only by air or sea. It was here, in the autumn of 1987, that 38-year-old Kenneth Raymond O'Donnell embarked on what was meant to be a peaceful solo journey into the heart of Alaska's rugged beauty. A seasoned outdoorsman from Portland, Oregon, Kenneth arrived in Juneau on September 18th and chartered a floatplane to take him to Wolf Cove on September 21st. There, he established a base camp and began exploring the surrounding wilderness. Weeks later, on October 10th, park rangers patrolling the area stumbled across Kenneth's camp. They found his tent intact but noticed the center support pole was snapped. No signs of a struggle were evident, and his camping equipment appeared untouched. They initially assumed Kenneth was out on a day hike and secured the camp, planning to check back the next day. But when they returned on October 11th, nothing had changed. Kenneth's camp remained deserted, and there was no evidence he had spent the night there. An extensive search was launched. Teams of rangers, state troopers, search dogs, helicopters, and even fixed-wing aircraft scoured the landscape. They found Kenneth's boots and cap about 3/4 of a mile from his tent. The following day, they located his gloves, some scraps of food, and his return plane ticket in another location, though how far it was from the original site remains unclear. Despite the clues, no definitive explanation ever emerged. There were no animal tracks, no evidence of foul play, no further pieces of clothing or gear. Some investigators speculated that Kenneth may have succumbed to hypothermia, potentially stripping off clothing in a state of paradoxical undressing, but if that were the case, more items should have been found nearby. As of today, his disappearance remains a mystery, and no trace of him has ever been found. Disappearances at sea, the 2011 Glacier Sound cruise incident. On August 4, 2011, 47-year-old Amanda Caldwell disappeared from the deck of a cruise ship as it passed through Glacier Sound near Douglas Passage. She was last seen just before midnight, ordering room service to her cabin. By the next morning, Amanda was nowhere to be found. Despite a massive search effort by state troopers, the U.S. Coast Guard, and volunteer vessels, her body was only recovered days later, miles from the ship's last known location. The cruise line quickly suggested her disappearance was intentional, but Amanda's family vehemently denied this, describing her as a devoted mother and enthusiastic traveler with no history of depression or mental illness. The authorities were baffled by the cruise company's premature statement, especially since their own investigation was far from complete. The controversy sparked public outcry, and speculation ran wild, some believing it was a tragic accident, others convinced of foul play. The mysterious case of Richard Lewis Grant, 2008, Wrangell, St. Elias National Park. In September of 2008, Richard Lewis Grant, an inventor from Boise, Idaho, disappeared in the northeastern sector of Wrangell, St. Elias National Park, a region known for its breathtaking landscapes and deadly isolation. Richard was testing his latest invention, an insulated survival pod he called the life cocoon. He left behind some of his belongings at a remote lodge near the White River and told locals he was heading toward McCarthy to winter in the Alaskan backcountry. Richard vanished without a trace. Despite extensive searches by both Alaskan and Canadian authorities, neither Richard nor his bright orange cocoon was ever found. Some believe he may have fallen victim to the elements, while others wonder if his fate was far stranger. Nearly 2 decades later, his disappearance remains one of Alaska's most confounding cases. Paul Lamont and the Mount Franklin Marathon Vanishing, 2015. July 4, 2015, marked the first time 64-year-old Paul Lamont entered the annual Mount Franklin Marathon, a brutal race that ascends 3,000 feet of rugged terrain before descending back to Seward. Although Paul was an experienced outdoorsman and athlete, he had never attempted Mount Franklin before. Paul was last seen by fellow racers about 250 feet from the summit. They estimated it would take him another hour to complete his descent. But Paul never came down. Despite hundreds of spectators lining the trail and search teams combing every inch of the course, no trace of Paul has ever been found. Search helicopters equipped with thermal imaging flew over the mountain for days. Cadaver dogs scoured the slopes. Volunteers searched well beyond the racecourse into remote areas. No footprints, no clothing, no equipment. Nothing was found. Paul's disappearance is the only such case in the history of the Mount Franklin Marathon. Final thoughts. The vast expanse of Alaska continues to captivate the human imagination. Its beauty is rivaled only by its peril. Some disappearances may be explained by accidents, natural hazards, or foul play. But others, like those in the Alaska Triangle and remote national parks, defy simple answers. If you're interested in exploring more cases, or diving deeper into the mysteries of the Alaska Triangle, let me know. There's a vast, chilling landscape still left to uncover.